Al Jazeera Podcasts.
I extend to the Iraqi people my sincere thanks for pledging allegiance to me.
I was installed as King of Iraq on the 23rd of August, 1921. An ancient civilization, but a new state.
I would also like to thank our allies and friends, the British.
It wouldn't have been wise to speak against the Brits back then. They were still a great power in our region. We were under their mandate, and they saw me as a strong ally. We needed to be patient. We had grown used to being patient.
I will be your king, but I won't be a tyrant.
They played the British anthem that day. We didn't have one, not yet. As I look back on my life, I wonder, how much did European powers use me for their own gain?
Ever wonder what history's most famous and infamous people would say if you asked them for their side of the story? Well, here's your chance. I'm Charles Dance, your narrator for Hindsight, an original podcast by Al Jazeera. This is a dramatized series based on historical events that resurrect some of the world's most notable figures. In this episode, we meet King Faisal of Iraq, a key figure of the Arab Revolt. He was born in the age of the Ottoman Empire and engaged in the fight for Arab independence. His patience, curiosity, and diplomacy endeared him to many, including the man who would come to be known as Lawrence of Arabia. A moderate at his core, Faisal came up against repeated betrayal by European powers. But in hindsight, his actions made him a main player in the shaping of the modern-day Middle East. Hindsight. You've heard of them. Now it's time you hear from them.
My full name is Faisal bin al-Hussein bin Ali al-Hashimi, but you may call me Faisal. I was born in the Hijaz, the third son of Hussein bin Ali, Grand Sharif of Mecca and ruler of the Hijaz Arabs.
The Hijaz is on the western coastline of modern-day Saudi Arabia. As for the year he was born, it wasn't customary for the existing tribal structure to hold birth records. Both 1883 and 1885 are widely cited in literature as his year of birth. According to the Hijri or Islamic calendar, which is based on the moon, it is 1883.
My family comes from the Hashemites, a Muslim family with direct lineage to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. I was brought up in the desert and lived with a Bedouin family.
This was tradition for the Hashemites and many other families. This way, they would learn the Bedouin way of life and grow strong, both in body and mind.
I was sent to the Otaiba tribe, outside At-Ta'if. I remember breaking my arm while climbing some rocks. I still have a scar on my head where a stone hit me during a mock battle. There was one time I was bragging about being better than another boy. My guardian pulled me aside and said, "If you are good to him, he will be good to you. If you do ill to him, he will do ill to you." It was a simple message, and one that stayed with me always. I lived with them for several years. I learned their beliefs on justice, the local dialect, poems, and much more. And of course, how to ride a horse. It was a time of tremendous growth for me. Life was simple, but it didn't last. In 1893, my family and I moved to Constantinople. My father had been summoned there the year before by the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, Abdul Hamid II. Father had been sent because of a conflict with his uncle, who was then the Emir of Mecca. We traveled on the Izz-ad-Din from the port of Jeddah. It was strange to see the land I knew so well disappear as we sailed away, but I knew that one day I would return. Many of my relatives were on this journey with me, including my 3 brothers.
Faisal! Abdullah!
After weeks at sea, Constantinople appeared before us as though in a dream. Domes and minarets appeared to touch the sky, while seagulls glided from coast to coast. This was the center of the Ottoman Empire, and to me, as a young boy, it felt like the center of the world.
The Ottoman Empire was a global superpower that stretched from North Africa and Southeast Europe into Western Asia. It was founded around 1299, but in the late 1800s its dominance was beginning to wane. People wanted independence and self-determination. Nationalism was on the rise, particularly in the Balkans and Anatolia, and soon Arabs will follow.
We moved into a house on the Bosphorus Canal, but we were held in virtual captivity. We were also put on a tight budget. We lived a very poor life, but maybe this period was good discipline for us. One thing is for certain, my brother Abdullah kept things interesting. He once put ground chili pepper in my inkpot. Unfortunately for our teacher, he used it then licked his pen. His mouth must have felt like it was on fire. My father was about to punish me for the prank, but Abdullah confessed. Education was highly valued in our household.
If you do not persevere today in your work, you will regret it tomorrow. Don't just take for granted that you are a Sharif and that alone is sufficient for you in life. A Sharif, my son, is one because of his knowledge and works, and on account of his manners and conduct.
I learned geography, arithmetic, and grammar. Father taught us the Quran, and within 2 years, I had memorized a quarter of it. I also learned some Turkish and dabbled a bit in English and French.
Faisal's ability to communicate in different languages and topics served him well in the future, but his inability to master the English language will leave him vulnerable during the Arab Revolt.
As I grew older, I received military training, and in 1904, I got married. Huzayma bint al-Sharif Nasser was my cousin. It was an arranged marriage. We had 4 children together: Azza, Rajiha, Ra'ifa, and Ghazi. My poor daughter Ra'ifa, she became disabled after a servant dropped her when she was little. She melted my heart. But I was not the most present father. I left the children's upbringing to their mother.
But before Faisal became a father, the early 1900s in Constantinople signaled great change. In July 1908, a group of revolutionaries called the Young Turks launched a statewide coup against Sultan Abdul Hamid II. They wanted radical reforms and to revive the constitution.
The Young Turks introduced many changes. It was all becoming unsettling.
And then, later that year, news came of the death of the Emir of Mecca. The Sultan appointed Sharif Hussein as his successor, to make amends, some scholars say, for his years of exile. But he also felt that Sharif Hussein would be able to guarantee support from the Muslim people if the Sultan needed to call on them to fight.
After 15 years, I was finally going home. Time seemed to speed up in the following years. My father saw that the Ottoman state was changing and that the Young Turks' way was deviating from that of Islam. In February 1914, he sent my brother Abdullah to speak with the British High Commission in Cairo. He asked the British if they would support Arabs in case they'd ever revolt against the Ottomans. But then, the First World War started.
Shortly after the war broke out, the Ottoman Empire allied with Germany and the Austro-Hungarian Empire. When the Ottomans entered the war, Syria became a military base. With anti-Ottoman sentiment increasing, Arab nationalists were growing in number. In the spring of 1915, Faisal, now in his early 30s, was given a new mission.
Father sent me to Damascus to gauge support for an Arab revolt. I felt honored to be chosen as my father's ambassador.
Thank you for this great welcome. I look forward to meeting my Arab brothers.
I met with the secret Arab nationalist societies and listened to their hopes and grievances. Syria was in decline, and the governors of Damascus and Aleppo complained about having little control over their people. They wanted to start the revolution against the Ottoman Empire.
I understand your concerns, and I will convey them to my father.
I felt throwing our region into turmoil before seeing how the Great War played out would be foolish, but I nevertheless took the demands of the Arab nationalists to my father.
These discussions are all leading towards the Hussein Makman correspondence, a series of letters between Sharif Hussein and the British High Commissioner in Egypt, Sir Henry Makman.
Next, I traveled to Constantinople. High-ranking generals told me the end of the empire was fast approaching. The city was not what it was when I lived there as a boy. Its economy was being hit hard. I informed my father of all that I had learned. The next few months would prove to be crucial.
In early 1916, Sharif Hussein came to an agreement with the British. The Syrian coast, inland, and Mesopotamia would come under Arab control, with the British and their French allies enjoying special economic privileges, such as access to minerals. In return, the British promised to recognize the newly formed Arab state and provide supplies for Sharif Hussein's upcoming revolt.
All this time, I was trying to appease the Ottomans and keep them in the dark about our deal with the British. I was also negotiating with the Ottoman military leader in charge of Syria, Jamal Pasha, to give clemency to political prisoners.
On the 6th of May 1916, Faisal was having breakfast in Damascus when he received the news. A number of the imprisoned Arab nationalists had been hanged.
I stood up and threw my kufiya on the floor.
Death has become sweet, O Arabs.
I picked up my headscarf and set out to return to Mecca, but Jamal Pasha wouldn't let me leave. I was able to convince him that I needed to get to Medina to help prepare Arab fighters to join the Ottomans in the war.
Legend has it that Jamal Pasha ordered Ottoman troops to arrest Faisal. But when they came up against the Bedouin tribal leader, Auda Abu Taya, he told them, "You're going to get Faisal when my palm grows feathers."
Once in Medina, I was able to persuade the Turkish leadership to allow me to reach Mecca as per father's orders. I was able to secretly move throughout the Hijaz and rally the tribes for the impending revolt. On the 10th of June 1916, my father stood outside his home in Mecca. He lifted a rifle and fired a single bullet in the direction of the Ottoman army headquarters. The Arab Revolt had begun. Tens of thousands of men joined the fight for an independent Arab state, one that stretched from Aleppo in Syria to Aden in Yemen. I took command of the Northern Army. My eldest brother Ali was in charge of the Southern Army, and Abdullah was in charge of the Eastern Army. I was able to recruit Arab ex-officers in the Ottoman army and soldiers sympathetic to our cause to fight with us.
Faisal, ever the diplomat, was able to gain loyal soldiers. By the end of October 1916, the war within the war was going well. Faisal and his men were encamped at Hamra in Wadi Safra. a strategic road at the time in the mountain towards Medina, which was still being held by the Turks. Also that month, Faisal received a visitor, a junior British intelligence officer from Cairo.
Your Eminence, I'm honored to meet you. My name is T.E. Lawrence.
It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Lawrence. You are most welcome.
Later known as Lawrence of Arabia, he had convinced his superiors to assist in the Arab Revolt. He'd met with Faisal's father, Sharaf Hussein, who sent in to see his son Abdullah, but it was Faisal who made a strong impression on the British captain. Lawrence later recorded this moment in his memoirs.
I felt at first glance that this was the man I'd come to Arabia to seek, the leader who would bring the Arab Revolt to full glory.
Over the following months, Lawrence watched and recorded Faisal's daily schedule.
He was constantly at the service of others, and I never saw an Arab leave him dissatisfied or hurt. I would eat with him and his guests. Faisal ate sparingly, and when he had judged that his household and guests were satiated, he would wait for the trays to be carried away. He prayed with a larger group. He was not an overtly religious man, but he was scrupulous in his personal observances and respected the times and obligations of prayer. He would often call in tribal elders to regale him with stories about their tribes and genealogies, or listen to some tribal poet reciting poems of war or events and incidents in his tribe's history. He often adjudicated poetry competitions and handed out prizes to the winners. He was a great connoisseur of Arabic poetry. His humility, patience, and self-control are impressive.
Faisal found Lawrence to be loyal and well-connected. The latter was able to get guns and gold to fund the revolt. In turn, Faisal gave the British captain camels, robes, and freedom to move.
The tribal leader, Auda Abu Taya, agreed to join us for our attack on the port city of Aqaba. With him and his men, we traveled through the desert from Al-Wajh to Aqaba.
There will be an eclipse. We will raid at night.
We stormed Aqaba and successfully fought off the Ottoman troops. We moved on and kept going north.
One of their military tactics was to use explosives to blow up the Hijaz Railway. The Hijaz Railway connected pilgrims from Damascus to Medina, but during the war it was used to transfer supplies and reinforcements, so Arab fighters blew it up. The explosives became a useful tool for Faisal and his brothers' forces to weaken Ottoman fortifications, like at Medina. Unable to break enemy defenses, Arab forces blew up the tracks around it instead. The Ottoman supply chains were being single-handedly destroyed. All the while, Lawrence was sending his observations back to the British.
One of the things we asked the British about was their intentions for Palestine. They told us Jewish settlement in Palestine would only be allowed insofar as would be consistent with the political and economic freedom of the Arab population. But even when they talked about it, I couldn't help but feel doubtful of the outcome. Turns out, I was right to be skeptical.
On the 2nd of November 1917, then British Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour wrote a letter publicly expressing London's support for a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. The Balfour Declaration was included in the terms of the British mandate for Palestine after the dissolution of the Ottoman Empire. The impact of that declaration continues to be felt today.
I was sympathetic with Palestine receiving Jewish refugees. Are Arab Jews not also Arabs? But I worried about the British impeding on the rights of Arabs.
The British intend to keep Palestine for themselves. They'll say it's part of a balance between conflicting religions. And they'll say it's a cheap price to pay for the British help so graciously given to me.
The British betrayed us then, and again.
Father,
Have you seen what the British have done? They've stabbed us in the back.
During the First World War, diplomats from France, Russia, Britain, and Italy met to decide who would inherit what from the Ottoman Empire. In May 1916, Britain's Mark Sykes and France's Francois Picot secretly signed the deal which carved up the Levant, with Russia's approval. The contents of the deal only became public after the Russian Revolution, when Leon Trotsky published a copy of it in November 1917. The Sykes-Picot Treaty superseded any agreement the British made with the Arabs.
I was infuriated.
Dear son, we must proceed with vigilance. I share your frustrations, but I urge you not to act on emotion.
I stayed focused on our goal for independence and moved my army north in conjunction with General Edmund Allenby's forces. In December 1917, the British and Allied forces captured Jerusalem. Less than a year later, on the 1st of October 1918, Damascus fell. I arrived intent on declaring my father's claim and making Damascus the capital of the Arab kingdom.
Faisal met with Allenby at the Hotel Victoria. During their 30-minute meeting, he was told his father's flag could fly. But as long as there was a war going on, territory once belonging to the Ottomans will be under British military control. He was also told that as per the Balfour Declaration, Palestine was out of his father's domain. Syria and Lebanon, in line with the Sykes-Picot Agreement, came under French control.
Fury doesn't fully embrace what I felt in that moment.
T.E. Lawrence later wrote about that meeting.
They made a strange contrast. Faisal, large-eyed, colourless and worn, like a fine dagger. Allenby, gigantic and red and merry, fit representative of the power which had thrown a girdle of humour and strong dealing round the world.
After the end of the First World War, Faisal attended the Paris Peace Conference in 1919. The stage was set to decide the fate of the fallen Ottoman Empire.
I was acting as an envoy for my father, now the King of Hijaz. The goal was simple: full independence for Arabs, and I knew that the British could help achieve the cause.
Gentlemen, I have come as a representative of my father. I am here to demand that the Arab-speaking peoples be recognized as independent with sovereignty guaranteed by the League of Nations. The exceptions to this request are the Hijaz, which is a sovereign state, and Aden, which is under British protection.
2 weeks before the conference, I signed an agreement with Chaim Weizmann, the president of the Zionist organization. The 9-point plan set out actions honoring the importance of mutual respect between Arabs and Jews. I added a final item at the end that said, if there was the slightest modification or departure in relation in my memorandum for Arabs to obtain their independence, I shall not be bound by a single word of the present agreement.
In his speech, U.S. President Woodrow Wilson laid out his ideal world order, which included the people of the Middle East. He stated they should be assured an undoubted security of life and an absolutely unmolested opportunity for autonomous development.
President Wilson and his wife Edith were good friends. The support of the U.S. was integral in our aspirations for self-determination. The British Prime Minister Lloyd George also asked me about the goals for an Arab state.
I will not accept any division of our lands, and I seek independence for the Arabs.
And then, nothing. The British and French fought hard against the findings. The delegates honored the Sykes-Picot Agreement. Not my father, not I, nor any other Arabs. I returned to Syria and spoke with representatives from various Arab cities, including Aleppo, Palestine, and Iraq.
I soon realized that the Westerners were profoundly ignorant about the Arabs and that their information was derived entirely from the tales of the Arabian Nights.
They saw us Arabs as caricatures. Their ignorance would have been humorous if our independence wasn't on the line. Next, I addressed the Syrian delegation in Beirut.
The world has prepared the conditions for us to demand our independence and has helped us in this regard. But independence is something that is taken and not simply given. And persons who seek their independence from Westerners without struggling, preparing and working for it, are as if they are building their thrones in the skies.
On the 10th of March 1920, I was proclaimed King of the Arab Kingdom of Syria by the Syrian National Congress.
Long live King Faisal! Long live King Faisal! Long live King Faisal!
The French were livid and sent troops to the outskirts of Damascus. Faisal lost the battle. He was exiled from Syria that July.
It was devastating, but I refused to give up on Arab statehood. I eventually went to London at the invitation of the British government.
His next opportunity was coming. More after the break.
I'm Samantha Johnson, and I'm here to tell you about Now You Know, a new show from Al Jazeera. Now You Know is dedicated to amplifying women's voices, stories, and at times, some pretty uncomfortable topics. This is a safe space where we go all in to offer you information and inspiration. Check out Now You Know, a new show from Al Jazeera. Find us on Al Jazeera's YouTube channel or listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Faisal I of Iraq, the making of a king. In pretty quick succession, the region became restive. Sharif Hussein sent Abdullah to Transjordan upon their request for him to send one of his sons, and uprisings began in Syria and Iraq. Arab nationalism was growing in the Middle East. The British mandate was in trouble. They called for the Cairo Conference in 1921.
Winston Churchill was the new British colonial secretary, and his job was to find a solution to the unrest in the Middle East.
It was decided that two large areas of the former Turkish territories, controlled by the British, would be given to princes of the Hashemite family, King Hussein's sons. Abdullah would rule Transjordan, and Faisal would become king of a new country, Iraq. With Faisal installed as king of Iraq, the British saw an opportunity to still maintain indirect control.
In all honesty, I prefer death to a life of irrelevance in the Hijaz. But I couldn't sleep, and I was chain-smoking.
Should I accept the throne of Iraq, even though it is in my brother's right?
Included in the British plan was a treaty that would mean eventual independence for Iraq. Faisal accepted.
I was crowned the first king of Iraq in August 1921, but it wasn't going to come easy.
God knows that I only wanted what is good for the whole of the Arab nation, and I did not seek any personal gain.
I had little knowledge of the challenge awaiting me. Part of the problem was, few people here knew me. It was going to be a greater undertaking than Syria. I knew I had to completely win over the people of Iraq, while maintaining relations with Britain, a tightrope to walk.
He needed a decisive PR campaign. He found that in Gertrude Bell, an English explorer and diplomat who spoke Arabic and Persian. She campaigned for King Faisal and helped him win support.
Getting people to live together and dedicate themselves to our new state was difficult. I had to come up with compromises. 1924 was a bittersweet year for me. Iraq's first constitution was passed. It established Iraq as a hereditary constitutional monarchy. I was head of state. Also, in 1924, my father was forced to abdicate.
In 1927, King Faisal faced another setback for the independence of Iraq.
I worked hard at transforming the state from 3 Ottoman provinces of Mosul, Baghdad, and Basra into one united nation. But I failed to get Iraq into the League of Nations. Britain refused to give up its mandate. My popularity was plummeting in Iraq. I understood the strong emotions fueling both sides, and the stress ate away at me. At this point, I was smoking heavily. I hardly ate.
A reprieve came in 1930 with the signing of the Anglo-Iraqi Treaty. It promised Iraq recognized independence and entry into the League of Nations. But it also promised that Iraq wouldn't pursue any interests that countered British interests.
My entire life, I had worked patiently with the British. I felt it was the only way we could rule our own state. But was I rebellious enough? Did I fight hard enough? Should I have forged ahead without British backing? The treaty was the best deal I could get. I took it.
Many supported the deal, but those against it said that bribes had been made by a member of parliament loyal to Faisal to get it passed. In October 1930, a large anti-treaty demonstration broke out. Scores of protesters were killed.
We were granted League of Nations status on the 3rd of October 1932. Finally, Iraq was independent.
A double life-size statue of King Faisal I, mounted on a horse, was unveiled in Baghdad. It had been erected in the direction of Damascus, but if he thought the rest of his reign would be peaceful, he'd be wrong. In 1933, the Assyrian community demanded an autonomous homeland in Iraq. King Faisal wanted to lead through consensus and compromise to quell the protests, but an iron fist emerged from under his velvet glove instead. Thousands of Assyrians were killed and more than 100 villages destroyed.
At this point, I was surviving on cigarettes and coffee. Occasionally, an aide would convince me to eat an orange. I was exhausted and became quite ill. In September 1933, I left for Switzerland. Queen Mary of England once suggested a doctor by the name of Albert Kocher.
Patients around the world traveled to Kocher's clinic in Bern, including many members of European royalty.
In my life, I had seen the end of a mighty empire and the dawn of new independent nations. I had experienced wars and betrayals. I became king twice, and I knew love. Under the stars of our vast deserts, I devoted my life to Arab rights, independence, and unity. The road was never easy, but I did the best with what was given.
On the 8th of September 1933, King Faisal of Iraq died of a heart attack. His body was placed in a coffin and draped with the Iraqi flag. It then set sail for the coast of Haifa, where it moved through processions in Syria and Iraq. Hundreds of thousands of men lined the streets of Baghdad before King Faisal's coffin was laid to rest in the royal cemetery. In his death, Arabs united in their mourning. Black flags flew all over the Arab world, including in Damascus, Aleppo, Beirut, Amman, and Jerusalem. Hindsight is narrated by me, Charles Dance. This series was produced by Sout Podcasts. Their team is producer and editor Rana Dawood, assistant producer Basant Samhood, production assistants Heba Nabulsi and Kaula Alamori, sound design by Taysir Kabani, assembly sound editing by Yazan Kawas. This episode is written by Justin Salhani, edited by Hema Afifi, research by Rama Sabanek, fact-checking by Rawan Samamra. Special thanks to Dr. David Murphy and Professor John Calvert for giving us interviews. King Faisal is played by Ziad Abaza. Extra voices played by Omar Zakaria, Isha Najjar, Tala Halawa, and Ahmed Zakaria. Recording by TVC Soho Post-Production. Additional research and fact-checking by Al Jazeera and Lynn Enwin. Joe DeFrias is the executive producer of Special Projects. Ney Alvarez is Al Jazeera's head of audio. Hindsight is a historical drama podcast. All dramatized scenes and dialogue are inspired by historical events, old interviews, and in some cases, new conversations with people close to the subject.